Welcome to Stories That Heal, where tales of redemption and resilience take center stage. Tonight, we delve into the journey of Barron Trump, a renowned restaurateur whose unexpected encounter with two young boys uncovered a past mistake that changed lives. Through courage, humility, and second chances, Barron learns the true meaning of leadership and community. Join us as we explore how redemption transformed his restaurant and his heart. This is a story you won't want to miss. Barron Trump sat in the driver's seat of his car, parked discreetly across the street from his own restaurant. Barron's Table. The glow of the marquee sign cast a soft light onto the cobblestone sidewalk, where patrons filtered in and out, umbrellas shielding them from the light drizzle. This wasn't an ordinary Tuesday evening for Barron. Despite the bustling business, despite the glowing reviews and steady revenue, he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was off. He had built Barron's Table with a vision, an upscale restaurant where food wasn't just a meal but an experience. Lately, though, it felt more like a machine churning out plates than the soul-stirring enterprise he'd envisioned. Stepping out of the car, he pulled his hoodie tight against the cool air and adjusted the cap on his head. Tonight, he wasn't Barron Trump, the owner and entrepreneur. He was just another customer. It was his way of getting closer to the truth, a habit he'd picked up during his teenage years of trying to understand the weight of his family name. This time, though, the stakes felt more personal. The restaurant buzzed with energy as he stepped inside. Servers darted between tables, balancing trays of steaming dishes and cocktails. Couples leaned in over candlelight, their laughter melding with the faint jazz playing overhead. The hostess greeted him with a practiced smile and motioned to a booth near the back. Barron nodded, thankful for the quiet corner where he could observe unnoticed. Sliding into the booth, he opened the menu he knew by heart, but barely glanced at it. His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail, the way the servers moved, the expressions on patrons' faces, and the flow of conversation. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, yet the unease lingered, like a shadow in the back of his mind. Just as he was about to dismiss his worries, a low, hushed conversation from the booth behind him caught his attention. The voices were young, maybe teenagers. He tilted his head slightly, straining to hear without drawing attention to himself. "Do you think he'll actually show up?" one voice whispered, high and anxious. "He has to," the second voice replied, sharper, more determined. "Mom said he's always here. If we wait long enough, we'll see him." Barron's brow furrowed. His first instinct was to dismiss it as idle chatter, but something about their tone kept him listening. He reached for the water the waitress had just placed on his table, keeping his movements casual. "What if we're wrong?" the first voice asked nervously. "What if it's not him?" "It's him," the second voice shot back. "Mom showed me his picture. She said he's the reason everything went wrong." Barron stiffened, his grip tightening around the glass. Their words hit uncomfortably close to home. Who were they talking about? And why did their tone carry such bitterness? He forced himself to take a sip of water, keeping his head down, but his mind raced. The waitress returned, her smile bright and unassuming. "Ready to order?" Yeah, I'll have the house special," Barron replied absently, waving her off with a polite nod. He needed her gone so he could focus on the conversation behind him. As she walked away, the boys' voices grew quieter, but their words still carried weight. "Mom said it's his fault she lost everything," the second voice said. "She said he stole from her." Barron's heart skipped a beat. Stole? He racked his brain, trying to piece together their fragmented accusations. It had to be a misunderstanding. Sure, he'd made tough decisions over the years, cutting ties with suppliers, letting underperforming staff go, but nothing that would warrant this level of animosity. At least, not that he could remember. "I just don't get why he'd do it," the first voice murmured, softer now. "Do you think he even cares?" Barron leaned back in his booth, his pulse quickening. The way they spoke, the certainty in their voices, it was like they were accusing him directly. But how could they know him? His face wasn't plastered all over the restaurant. He made it a point to stay out of the limelight, letting the food and atmosphere speak for themselves. The next words sealed his suspicion. "Mom said he ruined her life," the second voice said, his tone laced with anger. "And I want to see him. I want to see the guy who took everything from her." Barron's chest tightened. There was no mistaking it now. They were talking about him. But why? He sifted through memories of former employees, partnerships, and interactions, searching for any connection. Still, nothing came to mind. He needed to figure out who their mother was and what she believed he'd done. Deciding he couldn't sit idly any longer, Barron stood, making his way to the counter near the kitchen. From there, he could observe the boys without drawing attention. They looked young, maybe 12 and 14. The older one, wearing a hoodie, sat rigidly, his shoulders tense. The younger boy fidgeted with a napkin, his baseball cap pulled low over his face. "Hey," Barron said quietly to the waitress who had served him. "Those two boys in the back booth, do they come here often?" She glanced over her shoulder, her brow furrowing. "I don't think so. Why? Are they causing trouble?" "No, nothing like that," Barron replied quickly, shaking his head. "Just curious." The waitress shrugged and returned to her duties, leaving Barron to stew in his thoughts. He considered approaching the boys directly, but hesitated. If they were already angry, revealing his identity might escalate the situation. But if he stayed silent, he might never get the answers he needed. As he turned back to his booth, he caught a fragment of their conversation. "We just have to wait," the older boy said firmly. "He won't hide forever." The words felt like a challenge, and Barron realized he couldn't avoid this confrontation. Gathering his courage, he approached their booth, his hands shoved into his hoodie pockets to appear non-threatening. "Hey," he said gently, his voice low. The boys froze, their eyes snapping up to meet his. "I couldn't help but notice you seem a little uneasy. Is everything okay?" The older boy straightened, his eyes narrowing. "We're fine." Barron nodded, pretending not to notice the defensiveness in his tone. "That's good. I just thought maybe I could help. It sounded like you were looking for someone." The boys exchanged a wary glance. The younger one fidgeted again, but the older boy squared his shoulders. "Why do you care?" he asked bluntly. Barron hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I don't mean to pry," he said, his tone calm. "But if you're looking for someone, maybe I can help. I know a lot of people around here." The older boy studied him intently, his gaze sharp and suspicious. Then, slowly, something seemed to click. His eyes widened, and he leaned forward slightly. "It's you," he said, his voice low but accusing. "You're him. You're Barron Trump." Barron's heart sank. There was no use denying it now. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I'm Barron Trump, but how do you know who I am?" The boy's expression hardened, his green eyes blazing with anger. "Because of what you did to our mom," he said through gritted teeth. Barron felt the weight of his words like a blow. "Your mom?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who's your mom?" The boy's next words hit him like a thunderclap. "Angela Carter," he said coldly, "and you ruined her life." Barron Trump stood frozen, the name Angela Carter reverberating in his mind like a bell. The name stirred faint memories, ones he hadn't revisited in years. Angela Carter, a talented sous chef, ambitious, full of ideas. But what had gone wrong? His memory was clouded by the passage of time, but there was no denying the sharp edge in the boy's voice. "Angela Carter?" Barron repeated slowly, his voice heavy with confusion. "She worked for me. I remember her, but what do you mean I ruined her life?" The older boy, whose name Barron didn't yet know, clenched his fists on the table. "You stole from her," he spat. "You took her recipes, her ideas, and made them your own. She told us everything." Barron opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. He stared at the boys, their faces a mix of defiance and pain. These weren't accusations born from mere misunderstandings. They carried the weight of deep-seated hurt and anger. "Wait a minute," Barron said, taking a deep breath. "I never took credit for anyone's work. Angela was part of the team, and I always valued her contributions. If she felt otherwise, I swear I didn't know." The younger boy, his cap still pulled low, finally spoke, his voice quieter but no less cutting. "She said you made sure she couldn't work anywhere else, that you blacklisted her." Blacklisted her? Barron's chest tightened. The idea seemed unfathomable. I never did that," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I would never, intentionally—" "Then why couldn't she find a job after she left here?" the older boy interrupted, his voice rising. "She was one of the best chefs, and no one would hire her. You destroyed her career." Barron felt as though the ground beneath him was crumbling. His mind raced through memories of Angela. He remembered her passion for the culinary arts, her innovative approach to dishes, and her fiery determination. But he also remembered how she'd left abruptly, without explanation. At the time, he'd chalked it up to burnout or personal reasons, assuming she'd moved on to greener pastures. Never had he imagined she harbored such resentment, or that her departure had led to such hardship. "I need to talk to her," Barron said finally, his voice firm but tinged with urgency. "If what you're saying is true, I need to hear it from her. Please, let me talk to your mom." The boys exchanged wary glances. Finally, the older one relented, though his gaze remained guarded. "She's not here," he said, "but if you really want to talk to her, come to our place tomorrow." Barron nodded. "I'll be there. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I don't know how things got this bad, but I'm going to find out." The next day, Barron stood outside a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town. The building was old and weather-worn, its peeling paint and cracked sidewalks, a stark contrast to the upscale world he usually inhabited. He hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding as he thought about the woman waiting inside. How had it come to this? The door opened before he could knock. The older boy, Jacob, as Barron would soon learn, stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said, his voice neutral but tinged with surprise. "I said I would," Barron replied, stepping inside. The apartment was small but tidy, filled with signs of a life lived modestly but with care. Family photos lined the walls, and the faint smell of lavender lingered in the air. "Mom's in the living room," Jacob said, motioning down the hallway. "Don't screw this up." The words felt like a challenge, and Barron realized he couldn't avoid this confrontation. Gathering his courage, he approached their booth, his hands shoved into his hoodie pockets to appear non-threatening. "Hey," he said gently, his voice low. The boys froze, their eyes snapping up to meet his. "I couldn't help but notice you seem a little uneasy. Is everything okay?" The older boy straightened, his eyes narrowing. "We're fine." Barron nodded, pretending not to notice the defensiveness in his tone. "That's good. I just thought maybe I could help. It sounded like you were looking for someone." The boys exchanged a wary glance. The younger one fidgeted again, but the older boy squared his shoulders. "Why do you care?" he asked bluntly. Barron hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I don't mean to pry," he said, his tone calm. "But if you're looking for someone, maybe I can help. I know a lot of people around here." The older boy studied him intently, his gaze sharp and suspicious. Then, slowly, something seemed to click. His eyes widened, and he leaned forward slightly. "It's you," he said, his voice low but accusing. "You're him. You're Barron Trump." Barron's heart sank. There was no use denying it now. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I'm Barron Trump, but how do you know who I am?" The boy's expression hardened, his green eyes blazing with anger. "Because of what you did to our mom," he said through gritted teeth. Barron felt the weight of his words like a blow. "Your mom?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who's your mom?" The boy's next words hit him like a thunderclap. "Angela Carter," he said coldly, "and you ruined her life." Barron Trump stood frozen, the name Angela Carter reverberating in his mind like a bell. The name stirred faint memories, ones he hadn't revisited in years. Angela Carter, a talented sous chef, ambitious, full of ideas. But what had gone wrong? His memory was clouded by the passage of time, but there was no denying the sharp edge in the boy's voice. "Angela Carter?" Barron repeated slowly, his voice heavy with confusion. "She worked for me. I remember her, but what do you mean I ruined her life?" The older boy, whose name Barron didn't yet know, clenched his fists on the table. "You stole from her," he spat. "You took her recipes, her ideas, and made them your own. She told us everything." Barron nodded, bracing himself as he stepped into the room. Angela Carter sat on the couch, her posture rigid. She looked older than he remembered, her auburn hair streaked with gray and her face lined with stress. But her piercing green eyes, so full of fire back in the day, hadn't lost their intensity. "Angela," Barron said softly, "it's been a long time." She looked up, her expression flickering between shock and resentment. "Barron Trump," she said, her voice cold. "I never thought I'd see you here." Barron took a step closer, his hands in his pockets to appear less intimidating. "Angela, your boys told me what you've said about me, that I stole from you, that I blacklisted you. I need to know. Did I really hurt you that badly?" Angela leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. "You don't remember, do you?" she said bitterly. "Of course you don't. People like you never do." "Angela, I swear I don't," Barron said, his voice breaking slightly. "Please, help me understand." Angela's gaze hardened, and she set the TV remote aside. "You want the short version? Fine. You took credit for my work, all those dishes that made your restaurant famous. Most of them were mine. I thought you were mentoring me, helping me grow, but you were just using me." Barron shook his head, stunned. "That's not how I remember it. You were part of the team, Angela. I never claimed your work as my own." "Then why did every article about Barron's table only mention you?" Angela shot back. "Why did every award, every interview, credit you and you alone?" Barron opened his mouth to respond, but Angela wasn't finished. "And when I confronted you about it, what did you do? You made sure I couldn't work anywhere else. You told people I was difficult, that I wasn't worth hiring." "I never did that," Barron said, his voice trembling. "I swear to you, Angela, I never blacklisted you." Angela's voice rose, her anger spilling over. "Then explain why no one in the industry would touch me after I left." "I had to leave the field entirely, Barron. I had to take a job that barely pays the bills, all while raising 2 kids on my own. Do you have any idea what that's like?" Barron's heart sank as he absorbed her words. Could he have been so blind, so consumed by his ambition, that he hadn't seen the damage he was causing? "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I didn't realize. Angela, I'm so sorry." Angela's eyes filled with tears, but her expression remained hard. "Sorry doesn't change anything, Barron." Barron nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right, it doesn't. But maybe I can. Angela, you're one of the most talented chefs I've ever worked with. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a position at Barron's table, a senior position with full credit for your work." Angela stared at him, her disbelief evident. "You think you can just buy my forgiveness?" "No," Barron said firmly. "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about giving you the recognition you should have had from the start. I know I can't fix the past, but I can help you rebuild now. Please, Angela, think about it." The room fell silent as Angela considered his words. Finally, she exhaled deeply, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know, Barron. I don't know if I can trust you." "You don't have to decide now," Barron said. "Take your time. But whatever you decide, I want you to know I'm sorry. Truly. For the first time, Angela's expression softened, if only slightly. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Barron nodded, a glimmer of hope breaking through his guilt. Thank you. The rain had picked up by the time Barron left Angela Carter's apartment. The rhythmic patter against his car's windshield mirrored the thoughts racing through his mind. Angela's words echoed in his head, each one sharp and unrelenting. How had he not known? How had he allowed such harm to occur under his leadership? Back in the sanctuary of his penthouse office at Barron's table, he sat down and began sifting through old records. He pulled out employee reviews, project files, and media clippings from the early days of his restaurant. Each document was a snapshot of his rise to success. At first, the memories filled him with pride. He had built something extraordinary. But as he delved deeper, he began to see what Angela had described. Article after article praising his visionary leadership and culinary genius, with little to no mention of his team. Angela's name was conspicuously absent, despite her significant contributions. Barron sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. Had he really been that self-absorbed? As a younger man, he'd been laser-focused on his goals, determined to prove himself outside of his family's shadow. But in his quest for validation, had he trampled on those who helped him succeed? He pulled out his phone and dialed an old friend, Charles Freeman, a retired food critic who had chronicled Barron's early career. "Charles," Barron said when the line connected, "I need your help." A week later, Angela Carter stood in the doorway of Barron's table. She had spent days deliberating Barron's offer, weighing her pride against the opportunity to return to the world she loved. Her sons had encouraged her to take the meeting, though Jacob had warned her to be cautious. "Just because he says he's sorry doesn't mean you can trust him," Jacob had said. Now, as she walked into the restaurant, she was struck by how little it had changed. The open kitchen, the warm lighting, the faint hum of conversation, it all felt so familiar, yet so distant. She spotted Barron waiting near the bar, his demeanor subdued and uncharacteristically humble. "Angela," he said, rising to greet her. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, her expression guarded. "Let's just get to it." Barron gestured toward a private dining area where a table was set for two. "I thought we could talk over dinner," he said. "I had the chefs prepare a few of your old recipes." Angela hesitated but followed him. As they sat down, the first dish was brought out, a delicately plated appetizer she recognized immediately. "This was yours," Barron said softly. "The caramelized onion tart. It was one of our best sellers in the early days." Angela studied the dish, memories flooding back. She remembered the countless hours she had spent perfecting the recipe, the pride she'd felt when customers raved about it. But those memories were tinged with bitterness. "It's still good," she said after taking a bite. "But this doesn't change anything." "I know," Barron said, his tone earnest. "I've spent the last week digging through our history, our reviews, interviews, everything. You were right, Angela. Your name should have been on those dishes. And it wasn't. I let my ambition blind me to what was fair and right." Angela set down her fork, her expression skeptical. "So why now, Barron? Why suddenly care after all these years?" "Because your sons reminded me of what I should have seen all along," he admitted. "And because I've realized that success means nothing if it's built on someone else's pain." Angela folded her arms, her gaze unwavering. "Words are easy, Barron. Prove it." Barron nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a printed document. "This is a press release I've written. It acknowledges your contributions to Barron's table, names you as the co-creator of several signature dishes, and apologizes for my past mistakes. I'm sending it to every food critic and publication that's ever written about us." Angela took the document, scanning it carefully. The words were sincere, but sincerity alone wasn't enough. "And the job?" she asked. "A co-head chef position," Barron said. "Full creative control. Your name will be on every dish you create, and you'll receive the recognition you deserve." I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight, Angela. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Angela looked at him, her walls starting to crack. For years, she had carried the weight of resentment and loss, convinced she would never set foot in a professional kitchen again. But here was Barron Trump, offering her a chance to reclaim what she had lost. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice steady but cautious. Over the next few weeks, Angela began working at Barron's table on a trial basis. The transition wasn't easy. There were moments of tension and mistrust, and some of the staff were wary of the woman who had suddenly appeared as co-head chef. But Angela's skill and passion quickly won them over. One night, as the restaurant buzzed with activity, Barron stood at the pass, watching Angela lead the kitchen with quiet authority. Her boys, Jacob and Ethan, sat at a nearby table, beaming with pride as they watched their mother in her element. "She's incredible," one of the servers whispered to Barron. "How did you convince her to come back?" "I didn't," Barron replied. "She gave me a second chance." The turning point came when a prominent food critic visited Barron's table. The review that followed was glowing, with particular praise for the collaboration between the two head chefs. For the first time, Angela Carter's name was featured alongside Barron's, and the acknowledgement brought her a sense of validation she hadn't felt in years. That evening, after the last table had been served, Barron found Angela in the kitchen, wiping down her station. "I read the review," she said, her voice softer than usual. "It was nice to see my name there." "You earned it," Barron said. "Every bit of it." Angela turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I won't pretend the past doesn't hurt, Barron, but I appreciate what you're trying to do now." "I'll keep trying," he promised. "For as long as it takes." Angela nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Then maybe we can make this work." As the weeks turned into months, Barron and Angela's partnership flourished. Together, they introduced new dishes that combined their unique styles, and the restaurant thrived. More importantly, they rebuilt a foundation of trust and mutual respect. One evening, as Angela's boys sat at a corner table, Jacob called Barron over. "Hey," he said, his tone lighter than before. "Thanks for keeping your word. I guess you're not as bad as we thought." Barron chuckled, ruffling Jacob's hair. "I'll take that as a compliment." For the first time in years, Barron Trump felt a sense of peace. He couldn't undo the mistakes of the past, but he could ensure the future was brighter. For Angela, her family, and his restaurant. And in doing so, he discovered a deeper meaning to success, the power of redemption and the strength of humility. The months that followed Angela's return to Barron's table were a transformative period for everyone involved. The restaurant, once a symbol of Barron's singular ambition, had evolved into a space of collaboration and authenticity. Under the co-leadership of Angela Carter and Barron Trump, it became not only a culinary destination, but also a testament to the power of second chances. Angela's influence in the kitchen was immediate and profound. She introduced bold new dishes that honored her roots and incorporated innovative techniques she had perfected during her time away. Her passion and dedication inspired the kitchen staff, many of whom found themselves learning new skills and pushing creative boundaries. For Barron, it was a humbling experience. Watching Angela command the kitchen reminded him of the early days of the restaurant, but with a key difference. This time, her contributions were front and center. The staff began to see them not as rival figures, but as a united team, blending their strengths to elevate the restaurant to new heights. One evening, as they worked side by side during a busy dinner service, Barron glanced at Angela, who was carefully plating a dish. "You know," he said, his tone light, "I think this might be the best food we've ever served." Angela didn't look up, but smirked. "High praise coming from you. Let's hope the critics agree." The critics did. The new menu garnered rave reviews, and Angela's name became synonymous with the restaurant's resurgence. Food writers hailed her as a hidden gem rediscovered and praised her ability to balance innovation with tradition. For Barron, seeing Angela finally receive the recognition she deserved was as satisfying as any award. As Angela's reputation grew, so did her connection to the local community. Customers who had stopped frequenting the restaurant returned, curious to see the changes. Many were old friends and colleagues of Angela's, eager to support her comeback. The dining room buzzed with energy, and the once distant hum of conversations became a lively chorus of laughter and camaraderie. Angela's sons, Jacob and Ethan, became regular fixtures at Barron's table. They would sit in their favorite booth, watching their mother with admiration. Barron often joined them during quieter moments, striking up a surprising friendship with the boys. Jacob, once wary and skeptical, began to open up. "You know," Jacob said one evening, swirling his soda with a straw, "I thought you were just some rich guy who didn't care about anyone but himself." Barron smiled, taking no offense. "That's fair. I've made a lot of mistakes." Jacob shrugged. "Yeah, but you're trying to fix them. That's more than most people do." Ethan chimed in, his younger voice full of enthusiasm. "And Mom's happy again. She loves cooking here." Barron felt a lump in his throat. "She's the best chef I've ever worked with," he said. "You two should be very proud of her." "We are," Jacob replied, his tone sincere. "Thanks for giving her a chance." Barron nodded, realizing that the boys' acceptance was as significant as Angela's. They were a family, and he had been given the opportunity to make amends not just with her, but with them as well. As the restaurant flourished, an unexpected invitation arrived. Barron's table was nominated to participate in a prestigious culinary gala. The event, attended by the industry's elite, was an opportunity to showcase their talents on a national stage. Angela hesitated when Barron brought her the news. "I don't know," she said, frowning as she read the invitation. "These kinds of events are intense." Barron chuckled. "That's an understatement, but it's a chance to show the world what we've built together." After some convincing and a promise that she could design the entire menu, Angela agreed. The staff rallied behind them, pouring their energy into preparations for the event. The kitchen buzzed with excitement as they tested recipes and fine-tuned plating presentations. The night of the gala arrived, and Barron's table delivered a show-stopping performance. Angela's dishes stole the spotlight, blending her signature flair with the collaborative spirit she and Barron had cultivated. Attendees marveled at the harmony between the two chefs, noting how their distinct styles complemented each other. When the awards were announced, Barron and Angela stood side by side on stage, accepting the recognition with shared pride. For Barron, the moment was about more than accolades. It was about honoring Angela's journey and acknowledging that their success was a true partnership. Back at the restaurant, life settled into a steady rhythm. Barron found himself less focused on personal glory and more invested in building a legacy of inclusivity and collaboration. He implemented changes that prioritized the well-being of his staff, ensuring they felt valued and respected. Angela, too, found herself evolving. She began mentoring younger chefs, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to find their voices in the culinary world. For the first time in years, she felt truly fulfilled. One afternoon, as the restaurant prepared to open for dinner service, Barron approached Angela with a proposal. "I've been thinking," he said, "about starting a scholarship fund for aspiring chefs. We could name it after you." Angela blinked, taken aback. "Me? Why?" "Because you're proof that talent deserves recognition," Barron said, "and because I want to make sure no one else gets overlooked the way you were." Angela smiled, her eyes glistening. "I think that's a wonderful idea." On a quiet evening, as the last customers filtered out, Angela and Barron sat at the bar, sharing a glass of wine. The restaurant was dimly lit, the hum of the city outside a comforting backdrop. "You know," Angela said, swirling her glass, "when I first came back here, I wasn't sure if I could forgive you." Barron nodded. "I wasn't sure if I deserved it." Angela looked at him, her expression thoughtful. But you've proven me wrong. You've changed, Barron. And I think I can finally let go of the past." Barron felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, Angela. That means more than you know." As they clinked their glasses, the moment felt like a culmination of everything they had worked for. A second chance not just for the restaurant, but for themselves. Together, they had turned a story of regret into one of redemption. And as they looked toward the future, both knew that the best was yet to come. Thank you for joining us on Stories That Heal. Tonight's journey showed us that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about facing it with courage and making things right. Barron Trump's story reminds us that true leadership comes from humility, growth, and valuing the people who make success possible. As Angela Carter and her family found healing, so did the restaurant that once divided them. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of second chances. Until next time, stay inspired.